Michael Rogers was tired. He had lived his whole life in a big city full of noise, crowded streets, and busy people. Every day, he felt more and more exhausted. The constant sounds of cars, sirens, and people talking made it hard for him to think clearly. Work was stressful, and his small apartment felt like a cage. One evening, after another long day at the office, Michael made a decision. He wanted a change, a big one. He dreamed of a quiet place where he could breathe fresh air, listen to birds singing, and see the stars at night. A place far away from city noise and busy life. A place he could call his own. The next morning, Michael started searching for a cabin in the mountains. He looked at many pictures online and talked to several real estate agents. Finally, after a few weeks, he found the perfect place. It was a small wooden cabin near a calm lake, surrounded by tall pine trees. The sun shone through the leaves, and the water looked clear and peaceful. Michael bought the cabin and packed his bags. He left the city behind and drove several hours to reach his new home. As he arrived, the fresh air filled his lungs, and he smiled for the first time in a long while. The cabin was simple but cozy. It had a small porch with a rocking chair, a fireplace inside, and a kitchen that smelled like pine wood. The lake was just a few steps away, and Michael could hear the soft sound of water touching the shore. For the first few days, Michael felt happy and free. He woke up early every morning to watch the sun rise. He drank coffee while sitting on the porch, watching ducks swim on the lake. He took long walks in the forest and felt calm for the first time in years. One morning, while walking near the lake, Michael met a woman. She was tall and wore a bright red jacket. She smiled and introduced herself. "Hello, I'm Nancy. I live just down the road." "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said cheerfully. Michael shook her hand and replied, "Thank you. I'm Michael. I just bought this cabin." Nancy's smile became a little sharper. "I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, or HOA. We take care of the neighborhood rules here." Michael nodded politely. He didn't know much about HOA, but he liked Nancy's friendly attitude. "Feel free to ask if you need help," she said, then added, "Just remember, the rules are important. We like to keep everything clean and peaceful around here." Michael smiled. "Of course. I want to respect the neighborhood." Nancy gave him a quick look and said, "Good. We like to keep things civil. No loud parties, no trash outside, and grass has to be under 2.5 inches. Michael laughed quietly. "I think I can manage that." Nancy nodded and walked away. Michael watched her go and felt hopeful. Maybe this place would be a good start. Days passed. Michael enjoyed his peaceful life. He worked from home and spent time outside. He even started fixing small things in the cabin, like painting the porch and planting flowers. But one day, he noticed something strange. He was walking near the road when he saw Nancy talking with some other neighbors. Their faces looked serious, and they kept glancing at Michael's cabin. Later that week, Nancy came to visit again. This time, she brought a clipboard and a stern look. "Michael, I need to talk about the lawn," she said. "It's getting too long. You need to cut it soon." Michael looked at the grass. It was a little tall, but not very high. "I was going to mow it tomorrow," he said calmly. Nancy didn't smile. "You have to follow the rules. We don't want the neighborhood to look messy." Michael nodded. "Okay, I understand." After Nancy left, Michael felt a little uneasy. He liked the idea of rules to keep the neighborhood nice, but Nancy seemed very serious, almost too strict. One evening, Michael sat on the porch, drinking tea. The sun was setting, and the sky turned pink and orange. Suddenly, he heard a noise near the cabin's back window. He stood up and walked quietly to check. The window was closed, but he noticed some fresh muddy footprints leading to the door. Michael's heart beat faster. Who could be outside his cabin? Was someone trying to get in? He called out softly, "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer. Michael grabbed a flashlight and carefully walked around the cabin. The footprints disappeared near the woods. He felt scared but also curious. Who was visiting his cabin without permission? That night, Michael locked all the doors and windows before going to bed. He thought about telling Nancy, but he wasn't sure if she would help or just make things worse. The next day, Michael went to town to buy a small security camera. He wanted to keep his cabin safe and watch what happened when he was not there. He also decided to meet more neighbors, hoping to learn more about the community. One afternoon, Michael met an older man named Sam. Sam was friendly and smiled easily. "Hi, Michael. I heard about your cabin," Sam said. "I've lived here for over 20 years. You'll like it. Just watch out for Nancy, she's very serious about rules." Michael laughed. "I've met her. She's nice but strict." Sam nodded. "Yeah, she likes to control everything. But don't worry. Most people here are good." Michael felt better after talking to Sam. Maybe he could make friends in this quiet town after all. That evening, Michael returned to the cabin and checked the camera. There was nothing strange on the footage, only the quiet forest and the gentle waves on the lake. He smiled and felt calm again. But deep inside, Michael knew his peaceful time might not last long. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything in his quiet mountain cabin. A few days after Michael set up the security camera, he felt more relaxed. He thought that living in the quiet mountains would be peaceful, just like he had dreamed. But sometimes, life had other plans. One rainy afternoon, Michael returned to his cabin after running some errands in the nearby town. The sky was gray, and raindrops fell softly on the leaves. The air smelled fresh and cool. As he pulled into the small driveway, Michael noticed something unusual. The front door to his cabin was open just a little bit. Not wide open, but enough for a stranger to get inside. His heart started beating faster. He knew he had closed the door tightly before he left. He walked slowly toward the entrance, his mind full of questions. Who could have opened the door? Was someone inside? Michael whispered, "Hello? Is anyone there?" At first, there was no answer. Then, from inside the cabin, he heard a quiet sound, the noise of a game being played. Michael stepped inside carefully. The cabin looked messy. Cushions were out of place, a book was lying on the floor, and a snack bag was open on the kitchen table. He followed the sound to the living room. There, sitting on his old, worn-out couch, was a teenage boy. The boy was holding Michael's vintage Game Boy and playing a game with a smile on his face. He was wearing a blue hoodie that looked too big for him. Michael was shocked. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. The boy looked up but did not seem scared. Instead, he smiled lazily and said, "I'm Tyler. Your neighbor's kid." Michael frowned. "Your neighbor? Which neighbor?" Tyler shrugged. "You know, Nancy's son." Michael's eyes widened. "Nancy, the strict HOA president? Her son? Michael felt his calm disappear. How did you get in here? Did you open the door yourself? Tyler nodded. Yeah. The door was unlocked. Your porch light was off, so I thought you weren't home. Michael felt confused and angry. You can't just come into someone else's home without asking. Tyler laughed softly. Mom says the neighborhood is shared. She says the rules let us check on cabins like this one. Michael shook his head. No, Tyler. This is private property. You have no right to be inside without permission. Tyler did not seem to care. He put down the Game Boy and stretched. I'm just hanging out, he said. It's boring at my house. Michael wanted to say more, but before he could, Tyler stood up and looked around the cabin. I like this place, Tyler said. It's cool. Michael took a deep breath and said firmly, Tyler, you have to leave now. Tyler rolled his eyes but did not argue. He grabbed a soda from the kitchen and left through the front door, leaving it open behind him. Michael quickly closed and locked the door. He felt angry but tried to stay calm. This was not how he had imagined his peaceful new life. Later that day, Michael sat down with a notebook and wrote everything that happened. He also checked the security camera footage and saw Tyler entering the cabin through the back window. Michael realized Tyler had broken in, but he didn't want to create a fight with Nancy. He decided to talk to her first. The next morning, Nancy appeared at Michael's cabin. She looked upset but tried to keep a polite smile. Michael, she said, folding her arms. I heard Tyler was at your place yesterday. Michael nodded. Yes, he was. He entered without permission. Nancy frowned. He was just making sure everything was okay. The neighborhood is shared. We look after each other. Michael shook his head slowly. Nancy, your son broke into my home. That is not okay. Nancy's eyes narrowed. Michael, you don't understand. I'm the HOA president. I make sure the rules are followed. Tyler was doing his job. Michael took a deep breath. I want to live here peacefully, Nancy. But I need you to understand that breaking into someone's house is against the law. Nancy's voice grew colder. I think you're making a big deal about nothing. Michael felt a knot in his stomach. He realized Nancy was serious about her control over the neighborhood, and maybe she believed she had more power than she really did. I'm going to have to ask Tyler to stay away from my property, Michael said carefully. Nancy's lips pressed together tightly. I'll talk to him. Michael watched her walk away. He knew the conversation wasn't over. That night, Michael couldn't sleep well. He kept thinking about Tyler and Nancy. Was this the kind of neighborhood he wanted to live in? A place where neighbors didn't respect each other's homes. He looked out the window at the dark forest. The stars twinkled above, but the peace he had felt before seemed far away now. The next morning, Michael made a decision. He would install more security cameras. He would keep a record of everything. Most importantly, he would stand up for his home. He packed a small bag and drove to the town to buy extra cameras and lights. On the way, he stopped by the local police station. He asked how to report trespassing and what to do if it happened again. The officer was kind and helpful. She explained the rules about private property and said Michael had every right to protect his cabin. Michael felt a little stronger after the visit. He returned home, set up the new cameras, and fixed stronger locks on the doors and windows. That evening, as the sun went down behind the mountains, Michael sat on the porch, sipping tea. He looked out at the calm lake and thought about the days ahead. He wanted to believe this was just a small problem, a misunderstanding. But deep inside, Michael knew that this was only the beginning of something bigger. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he was ready. The morning sun streamed softly through the pine trees as Michael sipped his coffee on the porch. Despite the calm around him, his mind was full of tension. The recent visit by Nancy and the unwanted entry by her son, Tyler, had unsettled his peaceful life. For days, Michael had tried to stay calm and avoid conflict, but he knew he could no longer ignore the situation. He needed to set clear boundaries. Later that afternoon, Michael heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find Nancy standing there again, clipboard in hand, her expression serious. "Michael," she said firmly, "I think we need to talk." Michael nodded and stepped aside, inviting her in. They sat at the small kitchen table, the cabin's warm wooden walls closing around them. Michael noticed how Nancy's eyes were sharp, almost as if she was preparing for a battle. Nancy began, "I heard you reported Tyler to the police." Michael felt a sting but answered calmly, "I called to report that someone entered my home without permission." Tyler broke in. Nancy's lips pressed tightly. "You don't understand. Tyler was just making sure everything was okay. As the HOA president, I'm responsible for the neighborhood's safety." Michael took a breath. "I respect safety, Nancy. But breaking into someone's home is not safe for anyone. It's against the law." Nancy shook her head. "I think you're making this into a bigger problem than it is." Michael looked directly into her eyes. "Nancy, I want to live here peacefully. I want to be part of this community. But I need you and Tyler to respect my home." Nancy's face tightened. "I have my responsibilities, Michael. I will talk to Tyler." Michael nodded slowly. "Thank you." For a moment, the room was quiet, then Nancy's expression softened just a little. "I want what's best for the neighborhood," she said quietly. "Maybe I was too strict before." Michael smiled gently. "We all want a good community." Nancy left soon after, but Michael knew the conversation wasn't over. The next few days felt tense. Michael noticed Nancy watching his cabin closely. Sometimes, she was with other neighbors, talking quietly. Their glances toward his cabin were sharp, like small waves of judgment. Michael tried to focus on his work and his walks in the forest, but his mind kept returning to the conflict. One afternoon, as he watered his small garden, Tyler appeared at the edge of the property. "Hey, Michael," Tyler said, trying to sound casual. "I wanted to say sorry for coming into your cabin." Michael looked up, surprised by the boy's honest tone. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Tyler continued. "My mom makes me do stuff for the HOA. I guess I didn't think it was a big deal." Michael put down the watering can. "Thank you for saying that, Tyler. But you have to understand your mom's rules don't give you the right to enter someone's home without permission." Tyler nodded. "I get it now." They talked a little more. Michael learned that Tyler often felt pressured by his mother to enforce strict rules on neighbors. The boy seemed tired of the responsibility but didn't know how to say no. Michael decided to be kind. "You're welcome to visit anytime, but only if you ask first." Tyler smiled shyly. "Okay. Thanks." A few days later, Michael received a letter from the HOA. It said he was being fined for not complying with community rules because of excessive noise and unauthorized alterations on his property. Michael was confused. He hadn't made loud noises, and he hadn't changed anything outside. He called Nancy to ask for clarification. Nancy answered the phone with a cold tone. The board received complaints. You need to follow the rules. Michael tried to explain, but Nancy interrupted. The rules apply to everyone. You must fix the issues immediately. Michael sighed, feeling frustrated. He decided to attend the next HOA meeting to speak in person. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the lake. Neighbors sat in folding chairs, talking quietly. Nancy sat at the head of the table, her clipboard ready. When it was Michael's turn to speak, he stood up, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. I want to live here peacefully and respect the rules, he began. But I also need respect for my property and privacy. He showed the security footage of Tyler entering his cabin. Breaking into my home is not part of any community rule, Michael said firmly. Some neighbors nodded quietly. Others looked surprised. Nancy responded, Michael, we must follow the HOA's decisions for the good of the neighborhood. Michael shook his head. The law is above HOA rules when it comes to private property. The room grew quiet. Then, an older woman named Dolly, a gentle-faced retiree, stood up. I think Michael has a point, Dolly said softly. Rules are important, but kindness and respect are more important. Nancy's face showed frustration, but she said nothing. After the meeting, Michael felt a small victory. The neighborhood was watching. People were starting to question Nancy's strict control. But Michael knew the fight was not over. He still wanted peace not just for himself, but for everyone. That night, sitting on his porch, Michael looked at the stars. The lake was calm, reflecting the moonlight. He whispered to himself, this is my home now. I will protect it. The days after the HOA meeting passed slowly for Michael. The tension in the neighborhood was like a quiet storm, waiting to break. He kept focusing on his work and the peaceful views from his cabin, but he knew the trouble was not over. One afternoon, Michael was fixing a loose board on his porch when he heard a car pulling up. He looked up to see two sheriff deputies stepping out of a police car. His heart jumped. Before Michael could say anything, the deputies approached his door. Hello, Mr. Rogers. We received a call about a disturbance here, one of the deputies said politely. Michael invited them inside. What kind of disturbance? The deputies exchanged a look. We got a call from someone saying you threatened their family and were aggressive. Michael was confused. That's not true. I've been nothing but polite. The deputies asked if they could see the security camera footage. Michael nodded and showed them the videos of Tyler entering through the back window. The deputies watched quietly. Then, one of them turned to Michael and said, Sir, it seems your cabin was entered without permission. Michael felt a small relief. But then, the deputies looked at Nancy, who had just arrived at the cabin. Nancy stood with her arms crossed, looking upset. One deputy said, Ma'am, you called us. Nancy nodded. We want to understand what happened, said the deputy. Nancy took a deep breath. My son, Tyler, was at this cabin. The owner has been rude to us. I called to protect my family. Michael looked at Nancy and then at the deputies. The lead deputy spoke calmly. Ma'am, your son entered this property without permission. That is considered trespassing. Nancy's face turned pale. But I'm the HOA president, she said quietly. The deputy shook his head gently. The HOA rules cannot replace the law. Private property rights are protected by law. Nancy said nothing. Then, the deputies turned their attention to Tyler, who had arrived with Nancy. The boy looked tired and uncomfortable. "Tyler," the deputy said, "we need to talk about your actions." Tyler glanced at his mother but said nothing. The deputy continued, "You are being detained for unlawful entry. This is serious, but we want to handle it fairly." Tyler nodded slowly. Nancy's eyes filled with tears. "Please, this is a mistake." The deputies explained the process. Tyler would be taken to the juvenile center for a short time, and the family would be contacted for further steps. Michael felt a mix of emotions. He did not want anyone to get hurt, but he also wanted justice for his home. The deputies gently cuffed Tyler's wrists, and he was guided to the police car. Nancy stayed behind, trembling. Her proud, strict image was shattered in that moment. News of the incident spread quickly through the neighborhood. People talked quietly about what had happened at Michael's cabin. Some neighbors expressed surprise that Nancy had called the police on her own son. Others whispered about the strict rules and tensions in the community. Michael stayed quiet, wanting to focus on his work and healing. But he noticed a change. The neighbors no longer looked at him with suspicion. Instead, some nodded kindly, and others smiled when they passed. One afternoon, Dolly, the kind retiree from the HOA meeting, came to visit Michael at his cabin. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," Dolly said gently. "Nancy's gone too far this time." Michael thanked her. "I just want peace here." Dolly nodded. "Many of us want that too. We're tired of the strict rules and the fear." Michael smiled. "I hope things will get better." Meanwhile, Nancy was struggling at home. Tyler's detention had shaken the family. For the first time, Nancy faced the consequences of her strict control and actions. She stayed up many nights thinking about her son, the neighborhood, and her own role. One evening, she sat alone in her living room, looking at a photo of her and Tyler when he was younger, a happy, carefree boy. Nancy felt a deep sadness. She realized she had let rules and power blind her to what mattered most: family and kindness. She made a decision to change, but she knew it would not be easy. Back at the cabin, Michael felt a quiet victory. The law had spoken, and boundaries were clear. He understood that peace would take time, but justice had been served. He looked out at the lake, the water reflecting the soft sunset colors. The world seemed calm again. Michael whispered to himself, "This is my home. I will protect it and respect those who live here." After the incident with Tyler, the neighborhood slowly began to change. The heavy tension that had filled the air started to fade, like clouds moving away from a bright sun. Michael noticed this change every time he stepped outside. The mornings felt lighter, and the neighbors began to greet him with smiles instead of suspicious looks. Even Nancy, though still distant, seemed less strict during the brief conversations they had. One cool morning, Michael was walking down the dirt road near his cabin when he saw Dolly sitting on her porch. She waved and called out, "Michael, come here for a moment." Michael smiled and walked over. Dolly was holding a basket filled with freshly baked cookies. "I thought you might like some," she said warmly, handing him the basket. Michael accepted it gratefully. "Thank you, Dolly. That's very kind." Dolly smiled. "You deserve some kindness after everything. How are you feeling?" Michael thought for a moment. "Better. I feel like things are finally settling down. I can see that some people want peace too." Dolly nodded. Yes, and maybe it's time we all work together. The neighborhood needs more kindness and less strict rules. Michael looked at the clear blue sky above the pine trees. I agree. Maybe we can have a community meeting to talk about how to make this a better place for everyone. Dolly's eyes brightened. I like that idea. We should invite everyone, including Nancy. It's time to listen to each other. A week later, Michael helped organize a small community gathering at the local park. The sun was shining, and a gentle breeze moved through the leaves. Neighbors brought food, chairs, and smiles. Children played nearby, laughing and chasing each other. Nancy arrived quietly, holding Tyler's hand. The boy looked more relaxed than Michael had seen before. Michael felt nervous but greeted them with a calm smile. The meeting began with Dolly speaking softly, "We're here to build a community where everyone feels welcome and safe. Where rules help, but kindness leads." One by one, neighbors shared their thoughts. Some talked about their frustrations with the HOA rules. Others spoke about the importance of respecting each other's privacy. Nancy finally stood up and spoke. "I want to apologize for my actions. I realize now that my strictness hurt my family and my neighbors. I want to change." Her voice shook a little, but she looked sincere. Michael nodded. "Thank you, Nancy. That means a lot. We all make mistakes, but we can learn from them." Tyler smiled shyly and said, "I'm sorry too. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I want to be a better neighbor." The crowd clapped gently, welcoming the new beginning. After the meeting, Michael and Nancy started talking more. They found common ground and began working together to improve the neighborhood. Michael helped Nancy create clear, fair guidelines for the community. These rules focused on respect, kindness, and helping each other. Nancy learned to listen more and control less. She even invited Michael to join the HOA board to bring fresh ideas. Michael accepted, feeling hopeful for the future. Days turned into weeks, and Michael's cabin felt more like home than ever before. He planted a small garden, filled with colorful flowers and fresh vegetables. He invited neighbors for barbecues and shared stories around the fire pit. The lake reflected the warm light of the setting sun, and the birds sang sweet songs in the trees. One evening, as Michael sat on his porch, Nancy came by with Tyler. "We brought some lemonade and cookies," Nancy said, smiling genuinely. Michael stood and welcomed them inside. They spent the evening talking, laughing, and sharing dreams for the neighborhood. For the first time, Michael felt that this quiet mountain community was not just a place to live, it was a place to belong. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Michael looked up and whispered, "This is home." He knew challenges might come again, but now, with respect and friendship, they could face anything together. The story of a cabin, a strict HOA, and a misunderstood boy had become a story of healing and new beginnings. The days in the mountain neighborhood grew warmer with the coming of spring. Flowers began to bloom around Michael's cabin, painting the ground with colors of pink, yellow, and white. The air was filled with the sweet scent of pine and fresh earth. It was a perfect time for new beginnings, and that's exactly what Michael and the neighbors were embracing. Since the community meeting, things had started to change for the better. The neighbors talked more, smiled more, and worked together. Michael felt a strong sense of belonging that had been missing before. Even Nancy, once so strict and controlling, was becoming kinder and more open. One morning, Michael decided to organize a cleanup day for the neighborhood. "If we want this place to be better, we have to care for it," he told Dolly when he called her. Dolly smiled and said, "I'm happy to help." Let's invite everyone. Michael printed simple flyers and went door to door, inviting neighbors to join. The day of the cleanup was bright and sunny. People arrived with gloves, trash bags, rakes, and smiles. Even Nancy came, looking less formal than usual, dressed in a comfortable sweater and jeans. Tyler was there too, helping his mother and joking with the other kids. Michael felt a warmth inside as he saw everyone working together. The forest path near the lake, which had become cluttered with fallen branches and old leaves, was soon clean and welcoming. At one point, Nancy approached Michael. "Thank you for inviting me," she said quietly. "I want to help fix the mistakes I made." Michael nodded. "It takes courage to say that, Nancy. I'm glad you're here." They work side by side, clearing the paths, picking up trash, and planting small flowers in the gardens near the cabins. As the day went on, Michael noticed Tyler playing with a group of children. The boy's smile was bright, free from worry. Michael realized how important it was for Tyler to feel part of the community, not pushed away by rules or fear. Later, during a break, Michael sat on a bench near the lake, watching the water sparkle in the sunlight. Dolly joined him and said, "This is what community means, working together, understanding each other." Michael smiled. "I never thought I would find a place like this. It feels like home now." Dolly looked at him kindly. "You helped change things, Michael. You stood up for your rights but also gave others a chance to change." Michael felt proud but also humble. It wasn't just me. Everyone had a part. That evening, Michael returned home, tired but happy. He sat on his porch, sipping a warm cup of tea. The sounds of the forest birds singing, leaves rustling surrounded him like a gentle hug. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Nancy. "Michael," she said softly, "I wanted to say thank you. For everything. I'm trying to be better for Tyler, for the neighborhood." Michael smiled, even though she couldn't see him. "I'm glad to hear that, Nancy. We all make mistakes, but it's never too late to fix them." Nancy hesitated a moment, then added, "Would you be willing to help me plan more community events? I want to bring everyone together." Michael's heart lifted. "I would love to." They ended the call with a promise to work together. The next weeks were busy and full of hope. Michael and Nancy organized picnics, game nights, and nature walks. More neighbors joined in, bringing food, music, and laughter. The neighborhood felt alive with friendship and respect. One afternoon, Michael invited Tyler to help him build a small birdhouse for the garden. Tyler accepted eagerly. As they worked together, Michael shared stories about the forest and the birds that lived there. Tyler listened carefully, asking questions and learning. "I never knew so much about birds," Tyler said, smiling. Michael laughed. "There's always something new to learn when you take time to look." Tyler looked at Michael with respect. "Thanks for teaching me." Michael felt a connection he hadn't expected. He realized that kindness could heal even old wounds. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Nancy stopped by Michael's cabin again. She looked calm and peaceful. "I wanted to say sorry again," she said. "I was too harsh before. I hope we can move forward." Michael smiled warmly. "I believe we already have." They stood together, watching the sky turn colors of orange and purple. The cabin felt warm, filled with new hope. Michael knew there would still be challenges, but now he was not alone. The neighborhood was changing, becoming a place where people cared for each other. And that was the greatest victory of all. The summer sun was warm, but the mountain air remained fresh and cool. The neighborhood around Michael's cabin had grown closer than ever before. What once was a place filled with tension and fear was now a community filled with laughter, friendship, and understanding. Michael sat on his porch one early evening, watching the sky turn soft pink and gold. The sounds of children playing in the distance and neighbors chatting nearby made him smile. It was a peaceful scene, the kind he had hoped for when he first moved into the cabin. Nancy walked up the path, carrying a basket of fresh bread and homemade jam. Tyler was by her side, holding a small potted plant they had picked from their garden. "Hey, Michael," Nancy called softly. "We thought we'd stop by and share some of this with you." Michael stood and greeted them warmly. "Thank you, Nancy. That smells wonderful." They all sat on the porch steps together, sharing stories and enjoying the cool breeze. "I want to thank you for everything you've done," Nancy said. "You helped me see things differently about my son, the neighborhood, and myself." Michael shook his head. "It was a team effort. You made changes too, and that made a big difference." Tyler smiled shyly. "I'm glad we're all friends now." Michael looked at the boy and nodded. "Me too." As the night grew darker and stars began to twinkle, the three of them sat quietly, enjoying the simple happiness of the moment. Michael thought back to how things had been just a few months earlier, the anger, the fear, the broken trust. It seemed like a different life. But now, with respect and kindness, they had built something new. The following week, the neighborhood held a small celebration by the lake. Neighbors brought food, music, and games. Children ran freely, their laughter filling the air like music. Michael helped set up a small stage for local musicians. Nancy coordinated the food tables, smiling and chatting with everyone. Tyler ran around with new friends, his face glowing with joy. Michael looked around and felt proud. The community was stronger, more caring. He walked over to Nancy and said, "Look at this, a real neighborhood." Nancy nodded. "And it all started when we decided to listen and understand each other." Michael smiled. "Sometimes, it takes a little trouble to bring people together." Nancy laughed softly. "That's true." That night, after the celebration, Michael sat alone by the fire pit outside his cabin. The fire crackled warmly as he thought about the journey he had been on. He remembered the first time Tyler had broken into his cabin, the anger he felt, and the fear of what might come next. But now, those feelings had changed to hope and friendship. Michael looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you for this peace." The neighborhood continued to grow closer. Nancy stepped down from the strict leadership she once held and became a neighbor like everyone else, kind, helpful, and open. Michael and Nancy worked together to keep the community rules fair and simple, always putting respect first. Tyler blossomed into a happy, confident boy who loved exploring the forest and helping others. One morning, Michael found a small note taped to his door. It read, "Thank you for standing strong and being kind. You helped us all find a better way. From your neighbors." Michael smiled, feeling a deep warmth in his heart. He knew that this cabin, this community, was now truly his home. And so, the story that began with a broken trust and a call to the police ended with friendship and peace. It was a story about people imperfect but willing to grow, learn, and forgive. Because sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most beautiful beginnings.